Hello, and welcome to Free America. I'm your host, Nick Yaya, and this is the Free America Podcast. Today is Sunday, October 11th, 2020, and this is podcast number 12. And today I think we are going to have a fiery show. Our guest, iJoshuaLawrence, is really fired up over the topics we'll be discussing and is super well informed. So I'm just hoping that he won't be running circles around me. But before we get to our guest today, I'd like to update you on the topic of COVID-19 PCR tests and what is now being recognized around the world by various experts is that these tests are returning up to 90% false positives. And I've got a few interesting videos and interviews from doctors and nurses and also some exciting legal developments on what's coming next from an attorney. But before we dive into that, I'd just like to get a little business out of the way. Along with many of our viewers and listeners, I share in the excitement of our show continuing to grow. We're reporting increasing numbers of downloads from all over the globe, from the UK to France, Bulgaria to Kenya, Denmark to Algeria, and Saudi Arabia to Malaysia. Can you believe it? And as our viewership and listenership continues to grow, so does our opportunity to attract advertisers. But we're not quite there yet. So for now, we rely upon you, our viewers and listeners, to support this podcast. So if you are digging what we're bringing you each week, if you're picking up what we're putting down, if you like what we're putting into the mic, please consider making a contribution to our show by going to patreon.com/freeamericapodcast. You can now also find our podcast on Apple Podcast and numerous other podcast outlets. Just search for us on Apple Podcast by using my name, Nick Yaya, to find it. I also encourage you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Free America Podcast and on Twitter at Free America. And now you can watch our show live by visiting our brand new website at freeamericapodcast.com, where you'll find our live stream every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, as well as previous shows, links to numerous podcast outlets for our show, news articles, and other interesting and important videos. Now, as we've covered in previous episodes, I'd like to revisit the subject of PCR tests and false positives. As was reported by the New York Times back on August of 29, I believe, August 29th of this year, just pulling it up here, it became known that the tests being widely used to identify those infected with COVID-19 were in reality returning up to 90% false positives. And we'll go to this article real quick right here, just to give you a quick refresher on what I'm talking about. Your coronavirus test is positive, maybe it shouldn't be. And in the article, it says that most of these people are not likely contagious, and identifying them may contribute to bottlenecks that prevent those who are contagious from being found in time. The article goes on to state that it's really irresponsible to identify the virus in this way. And then in 3 sets of testing data, let me highlight this for you, include cycle thresholds compiled by officials in Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada. Up to 90% of people testing positive carried barely any virus, a review of the Times found. So we reported on this back when the story came out. And this new information that was reported should have put a very different spin on what's being fed to us by the mainstream media and by our elected officials. Unfortunately, it did not. And they have since doubled down on selling the false narrative of nearly 8 million positive cases here in the US and more than 200,000 deaths. Now, experts from around the globe are coming forward to once again dispute this narrative and back up the findings by the New York Times with additional evidence and reports from the front lines. So first, I'd like to share with you a snippet from an interview that was brought to our attention by one of our viewers, a gentleman named Rick from just outside Toronto, who's a fan of the show and who often shares great information from around the web. This one actually comes via a woman named Eva Kareem Bartlett, who is an accredited journalist who exposed CNN to the World Health Organization for lying about the Syria narrative. This interview is with a nurse who has worked in the field for over 20 years. Her report lines up with what I've been hearing from nurses here in the US, in the Los Angeles area specifically, which is that instead of being overrun, our hospitals have been devoid of patients and have seen no more prevalence of COVID-infected patients than they would any other cold or flu season. So let's go to that article right now, and I'll share that with you, and you can read it along with me. Now, we're not going to read the whole article, but what I'm going to do, this is on a website called Lockdown Skeptics, and this is brought by a guy named Will Jones. Excuse me. I'm going to go over some of the, there's just a Q&A in here, and I'm going to get to some of the more salient points real quick about this. So let's start off with some of these quick yes and no questions. So did you ever see any COVID patients under 20 years old? No. And this is, I'm sorry, this is a nurse in the UK, if I didn't already mention that. But a lot of similarities here in the US. Did you see COVID patients under 50 years old? No. What was the general age range of the COVID patients? Her answer, over 70. Were the elderly moved to care homes? Not immediately, but we know that also happened here in the US. Approximately what percentage of COVID patients had other pre-existing conditions? 100% was her answer. Okay. Please give us some examples of these pre-existing conditions: heart failure, Parkinson's, strokes, leg cellulitis, leg ulcers, diabetes, kidney disease, and general anopia are some examples. And they ask it says, is it true that other viruses like flu and pneumonia mostly kill the elderly who have at least one pre-existing condition? Yes. In your over 20 years of experience, did you see a specific difference between COVID patients and other patients you have treated that have had severe viral infection? No. Okay. So again, what we're seeing here, folks, is really what I just mentioned, that this isn't much different from the normal cold and flu season. All right. And if you reduce the reported COVID numbers by 90%, you get a number that's on par with actually about 25 to 30% of the normal flu-related deaths and infections in a normal year here in the United States. All right. So things have been way overblown. But now we're going to move on to a doctor and attorney who is a member of the bar in both California and in Germany, who echoes what the New York Times article said, but also reaffirms what many of us who do independent research have discovered, that autopsies of the dead were intentionally not performed, and hospitals were paid to list the cause of death as being from COVID. This was also brought to my attention by another fan of the show who wishes to remain anonymous, which reminds me, if you have something you think we should be covering here at Free America, feel free to message us on Facebook at Free America Podcast, or send me a message directly at Nick Yaya 111. That's Nick Yaya followed by 3 1s. So here is Dr. REINER FUELLMICH, and I hope I pronounced his name correctly, but Dr. FUELLMICH has some very interesting points to share with us. So let me just, I did not include the audio. So let me stop that real quick and go back and try it again. And here we go. Dr. FUELLMICH, share audio, and here we go.
The German RKI, that is, again, the equivalent of the CDC, had initially, strangely enough, recommended that no autopsies be performed. And there are numerous credible reports that doctors and hospitals worldwide had been paid money for declaring a deceased person a victim of COVID-19 rather than writing down the true cause of death on the death certificate, for example, a heart attack or a gunshot wound. Without the autopsies, we would never know that the overwhelming majority of the alleged COVID-19 victims had died of completely different diseases, but not of COVID-19. The assertion that the lockdown was necessary because there were so many different infections with SARS-CoV-2 and because the healthcare systems would be overwhelmed is wrong for three reasons, as we have learned from the hearings we conducted with the Corona Committee and from other data that has become available in the meantime. A, the lockdown was imposed when the virus was already retreating. By the time the lockdown was imposed, the alleged infection rates were already dropping again. B, there's already protection from the virus because of cross or T-cell immunity. Apart from the above mentioned lockdown being imposed when the infection rates were already dropping, there's also cross or T-cell immunity in the general population against the coronaviruses contained in every flu or influenza wave. This is true even if this time around a slightly different strain of the coronavirus was at work. And that is because the body's own immune system remembers every virus it has ever battled in the past. And from this experience, it also recognizes a supposedly new, but still similar strain of the virus from the corona family. Incidentally, that's how the PCR test for the detection of an infection was invented by now infamous Professor Drosten. At the beginning of January of 2020, based on this very basic knowledge, Mr. Drosten developed his PCR test, which supposedly detects an infection with SARS-CoV-2. Without ever having seen the real Wuhan virus from China, only having learned from social media reports that there was something going on in Wuhan, he started tinkering on his computer with what would become his corona PCR test. For this, he used an old SARS virus, hoping it would be sufficiently similar to the allegedly new strain of the coronavirus found in Wuhan. Then he sent the result of his computer tinkering to China to determine whether the victims of the alleged new coronavirus tested positive. They did. And that was enough for the World Health Organization to sound the pandemic alarm and to recommend the worldwide use of the Drosten PCR test for the detection of infections with the virus now called SARS-CoV-2. Drosten's opinion and advice was, this must be emphasized once again, the only source for the German government when it announced the lockdown, as well as the rules for social distancing and the mandatory wearing of masks. And this must also be emphasized once again, Germany apparently became the center of especially massive lobbying by the pharmaceutical and tech industry because the world, with reference to the allegedly disciplined Germans, should do as the Germans do in order to survive the pandemic. C, and this is the most important part of our fact-finding. The PCR test is being used on the basis of false statements, not based on scientific facts with respect to infections. In the meantime, we have learned that these PCR tests, contrary to the assertions of Messrs. Drosten, Wheeler, and the WHO, do not give any indication of an infection with any virus, let alone an infection with SARS-CoV-2. Not only are PCR tests expressly not approved for diagnostic purposes, as is correctly noted on leaflets coming with these tests, and as the inventor of the PCR test, Kary Mullis, has repeatedly emphasized. Instead, they're simply incapable of diagnosing any disease. That is, contrary to the assertions of Drosten, Wheeler, and the WHO, which they have been making since the proclamation of the pandemic, a positive PCR test result does not mean that an infection is present. If someone tests positive, it does not mean that they're infected with anything, let alone with the contagious SARS-CoV-2 virus. Even the United States CDC, even this institution agrees with this, and I quote directly from page 38 of one of its publications on the coronavirus and the PCR tests, dated July 13th, 2020. First bullet point says, detection of viral RNA may not indicate the presence of infectious virus or that 2019 nCoV is the causative agent for clinical symptoms. Second bullet point says, The performance of this test has not been established for monitoring treatment of 2019 nCoV infection. Third bullet point says, this test cannot rule out diseases caused by other bacterial or viral pathogens.
Okay, so there you have it. Again, from another expert in another part of the world, echoed also by the CDC. So we also, I want to share with you another quick video here with a very well-known and respected doctor named Mike Yeadon, who served as vice president and chief science officer for the pharmaceutical company Pfizer, who also confirms that the PCR tests have yielded false positives and that the government is using these inflated numbers as a tool of fear to maintain these authoritarian lockdowns. So here's Dr. Mike, and we'll roll that clip for you right now.
Something like in the region of 9 out of 10 of the tests that are coming up positive, people are told you have COVID, may not actually have COVID at all.
Yes, you've said it exactly correctly. So another way to say it is if the false positive rate, the fraction of your tests that come up positive, though they do not have the virus, if that's greater than what's called the prevalence, the fraction of people who've got the virus, it doesn't matter how hard you try and you can't subtract it, you will end up with most of your positives being what are called false positives. They don't have the virus, they're not sick, they won't get sick, they're not contagious. And you may have noticed, Julia, and that's possibly why I was thinking about this for over the last few weeks. Have you noticed that when we get so-called surges or peaks, Leicester and so on, almost no one was ill? And that figures now, because I think between 5 times and 10 times the number of, only 1/5 or 1/10 actually had the virus. These are the ones that are true positives. And so the problem is, if the false positive rate is higher than the prevalence, you cannot use the assay. There's nothing you can do to fix it. And I believe this, let me just finish this one sentence. It may sound controversial, but unless they can fix this assay, I believe they should stop pillar 2 testing, because there isn't an assay that can do other than what I've described to generate mostly false positives.
So this isn't that, oh, this is a peculiarly poor test. It's just this kind of testing in the community. And this is the big difference between testing in hospital and testing in the community. Testing in hospital, we call pillar 1 testing. In the community, pillar 2. Now, when you're doing pillar 1, you're testing people who are already ill. They've got symptoms, and you're doing testing with medical professionals taking the test, and they're going straight to the lab. And that, of course, has a much higher rate of reliability than a test done by non-medically trained people in the community of, to a certain extent, a fairly random sample of people, because a lot of people are going to get tested who haven't got symptoms themselves. They may think they've been in contact with someone who thinks they've got COVID. Again, odds are they haven't got it. So it's the number of people and the reason why they're being tested that's also the issue.
Yes, you said it right. So the pillar 1 test in hospital, certainly just to take us back to that ghastly month of March, where we were at the peak of infections, and then in April, about April 10th, we saw the peak of deaths, and then for the last 6 months, it's fallen continuously. But back in March, I've looked at the data, and fully 30% of the people who were sampled were positive. So now it's 30% who are positive, and then 0.8% who are false positive. Basically, the effect there is, instead of 30 out of 100 being positive, and they do have the virus, you get 31. There's that one. So you can see now the effect of false positives is irrelevant.
Yeah.
But now, when there's almost no one who's got it, an average member of the public, ONS says it's about 0.1%, 1 in 1,000. 0.8% is this fixed false positive rate. It's generating 5 to 10 times more false positives than real ones. And earlier in the summer, it was 20 times. So it's got to stop. They must not use this assay. It's producing catastrophizing. And also an important point, Julie, if I was right and the government said, Mike Yeadon's right, Carl Hennigan's right, let's just pull this test. There's nothing else actually happening of any great note. Yes, there are some in hospital. Yes, there are some dying. But as compared with the thousands dying every day, we're down to about 1% of that. And there actually isn't any fear that the government could provide. So it crosses my mind. I don't know why. I'm not making a conspiracy, but if they wanted us to be fearful, the best way to do it is carry on using a test that produces mostly false positives, because wherever they travel, that's what they'll get.
And this is the thing, and the more testing you do, the more false positives you'll get. In fact, you'll make it more likely there will be more. But with 3,000.
Okay, so there you have it. That was with Julia Hartley. Sorry, and there you have it right there. So again, these are credible, well-known individuals that are basically saying that the official numbers or the official story is false. It's based on falsehoods. And one final note, briefly back, I'd like to briefly go back to actually in a related article from Dr. Yeadon. I want to share this with you real quick. There's a correlation between the testing and the number of cases. So let's look at this really quick. Right, here it is. This article I'd like to share with you. It says in the data for UK, Sweden, and the world, it can be seen that in all cases, deaths were on the rise in March through mid or late April, then began tapering off in a smooth slope, which flattened out around the end of June and continues to today. The case rates, however, based on testing, rise and swing upwards and downwards wildly. And you can see that right here in the United Kingdom. These are the cases versus deaths. So the cases are in red here. And this is as testing goes up, so do the number of cases. But the deaths have been steadily declining over time. Here's the United States. As testing has gone up, so has the number of cases. But look at the deaths. They've been relatively low. Okay, daily confirmed deaths. Same in Sweden. And of course, around the world. So, as you can see, there is a direct correlation between the rise and fall and the number of increased or decreased testing. One final note, we'll go back briefly to Dr. FUELLMICH. I'll get that right one of these times, who informs us that the World Health Organization and several leading experts are guilty of crimes against humanity and will pay for the economic and psychological impact of their knowingly false recommendations regarding COVID-19 testing, lockdowns, and mandatory mask wearing. So in this final video here, like I said, we're going to show you, again, Dr. REINER FUELLMICH, and he's going to break down for us exactly how these bastards are going to pay. And here we go.
People. What about fraud, intentional infliction of damage, and crimes against humanity? Based on the rules of criminal law, asserting false facts concerning the PCR tests or intentional misrepresentation, as it was committed by Messrs. Drosten and Wheeler, as well as the WHO, can only be assessed as fraud. Based on the rules of civil tort law, this translates into intentional infliction of damage. The German professor of civil law, Martin Schwab, supports this finding in public interviews. In a comprehensive legal opinion of around 180 pages, he has familiarized himself with the subject matter like no other legal scholar has done thus far, and in particular has provided a detailed account of the complete failure of the mainstream media to report on the true facts of this so-called pandemic. Messrs. Drosten, Wheeler, and Tedros of the WHO all knew, based on their own expertise or the expertise of their institutions, that the PCR tests cannot provide any information about infections, but asserted over and over again to the general public that they can, with their counterparts all over the world repeating this. And they all knew and accepted that on the basis of their recommendations, the governments of the world would decide on lockdowns, the rules for social distancing, and mandatory wearing of masks. the latter representing a very serious health hazard, as more and more independent studies and expert statements show. Under the rules of civil tort law, all those who have been harmed by these PCR test-induced lockdowns are entitled to receive full compensation for their losses. In particular, there is a duty to compensate, that is, a duty to pay damages for the loss of profit suffered by companies and self-employed persons as a result of the lockdown and other measures. In the meantime, however, the anti-corona measures have caused and continue to cause such devastating damage to the world's population's health and economy that the crimes committed by Messrs. Drozd, Wheeler, and the WHO must be legally qualified as actual crimes against humanity, as defined in Section 7 of the International Criminal Code.
And there you have it. So the World Health Organization and these bastards are going to pay, and pay dearly. Maybe we'll bankrupt them and put them out of business for good, because they're just no good. Now, I know that's a lot to take in during one sitting. So what I'm going to do is include links to all of these videos and articles in the description section of this episode. But suffice it to say, we are aware of the fraud, and it is up to us, that's you and me, to make others aware of it as well. So share this information and these links that I will be giving you with as many people as possible. And let's bring this nightmare to an end. Okay. So let's bring on today's guest. He is a super interesting and extremely well-informed guy. He is a self-described Democrat turned free thinker, former Democrat, I will say, turned free thinker. He's also a member of Black Voices for Trump. Please join me in welcoming JoshuaLawrence. Joshua.
Hey. How's it going, bud? How are you?
Great. How are you doing this evening?
I can't complain at all. I cannot complain. Crimes against humanity. Those are the most important 3 words that I heard out of all of that.
Right. That's the good news. Yeah. That's the good news, man. I mean, because, everyone knows it's been happening, but now, like they say, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
What you can, absolutely.
As famously uttered by one of my favorite actors, Denzel Washington, in one of my favorite movies, Training Day.
Absolutely.
If you guys haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it, because Denzel is on fire in that
movie. One of the greatest films.
Dude, so welcome to the show, man. I'm glad to have you on. I know I read a lot read a lot of your posts on Facebook, and that's how I really kind of became interested in what you do and what you're talking about. And you've always got such poignant and interesting things to say. And so I'm psyched to have you on the show today, man. And I know
cool.
We got a lot of great things to talk about. I want to ask you, speaking of this whole
You still there, Nick? You went out on me, bud. I think we lost him at the moment. Wait for him to come back. Come on, Nick. Don't leave me, buddy. We need you tonight. I think I'm the live one now. So while we wait for him to come back, just have a quick conversation with you guys and tell you guys a little bit about myself. My name is JoshuaLawrence. 31 years old. I live outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, here in a town called Newcastle, Pennsylvania. It's a small town. The county holds roughly about 86,000 people throughout the entire county. And just like everybody else all over the rest of the world, we have been dealing with a lot of the things that have been going on with COVID. This is a real disease. However, I do believe that this disease is overplayed and overused for authoritarian purposes to usher in this this new world order that we've been hearing so much about over the past couple years. So one of the things in regards to that, I'm waiting on a message from Nick now to see what's going on. But one of the things with that is there's a lot of misinformation that people have been putting out into the world in regards to COVID-19, in regards to just a lot of things that go around. There he goes.
Thanks, man. Thanks for picking up the slack. I had a little technical issue on this end.
Man. You know, I can handle myself. I can handle myself.
I figured you could. All right, good. Well, I'm glad we're back on track here. So what did I miss?
I was just explaining myself a little bit and everything that's been going on in the world, a little bit where I'm from, just talking to people about, this COVID-19 and how it is real, but it is overhyped more than anything, and how we're dealing with it in our town and everything like that. But yeah, you're back. So whatever you want to talk about, we're here.
Well, that's cool. That's cool, man. I think you make a good point on that, and that it is a real virus and it is dangerous, and people should take caution. However, the people that really need to take caution are the same people that should do so every year whenever the flu or colds come around, which are the elderly, people who are infirm, people who have weakened immune systems. But to lock down the entire economy and force everybody to wear masks, I think is way overstepping and unnecessary. So cool. Well, dude, so what let's get into some of the current stuff that's been going on. What do you think? What did you think about the VP debate, man?
It was boring, but for what it needed to happen. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it was most definitely boring. It wasn't as exciting, I guess, as you would say the first one was,
right?
With all the the name calling and stuff like that. However, I do believe both sides attempted to get their points across. Like I said, I'm more for Trump this time. So some of the things that I was hearing Kamala Harris say, when you look back on the record of some of the things that she spoke on, there was a lot of false information that was being put out there. Everything from the him not condemning white supremacy and all that other stuff. I'm glad that Pence didn't actually speak on Trump's previous performance, before.
Yeah.
But I like Mike Pence. I think he's a respectable person, and I like how he got his point across. He told her, you're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. And I think that more than anything should set some type of precedence for people to really start to pay attention to what's going on, because when we're talking about people's opinions, everybody can have an opinion, but when you're actually starting to go against things that are factual, and then you continue to run with those things as if they're not factual, to me, I don't understand how people can do that over and over again. It's almost like it's a broken disc. You know what I mean? That just keeps on replaying and keeps on replaying. At some point, it's like, we've cleared the air on this so many times. I don't understand why we continue to have conversations on specific topics. You know what I mean? That have already been addressed. But as far as the vice presidential debate goes, it needed to happen. I like Mike Pence. I think he's a reserved, calm person, and I'm glad that he got out what he had to say. The fly. I didn't see the fly. I saw the fly. No, I didn't see the fly until the next day. Somebody had brought up the fly, and then I was like, oh, I guess I just wasn't looking at it like that. But I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Yeah,
I think I must have heard that about 150 times.
Right.
As he was trying to finish his points. But you brought up that Kamala made several untrue statements, and one of the big glaring ones that I didn't recognize at the time because I'm not a historian was the one about Abraham Lincoln not appointing a justice, but in fact he actually did. When Congress was out of session, he waited. I think it was in September when this occurred, when one of the justices died. And he waited until they returned to session in December. And the very first day they were back in session,
He appointed a justice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so it's like she didn't even need to make up that lie. She went out of her way to make up
something. Yeah, to
make a lie.
Absolutely.
That was completely unrelated to Trump or policy or America or Pence or any of that.
And that's what they've been doing his entire presidency, to be honest with you. Like it's crazy because I get a lot of people who ask me, they're like, how can you vote for Trump as a black person? How can you vote for Trump considering everything that's going on? And we don't watch the same TV, clearly. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like the news that some people watch is different from what I'm watching and the things that I'm seeing. I've always believed that policies should always go above personalities. And I studied political science, you know, when I was in college. And that was one of the things that like we talked about, you know what I mean? How policies are important, you know what I mean? And we're at a point now where everybody's just so caught up in the personality.
Right.
And the personality side of him, everybody just wants to destroy. You know what I mean? So there's been multiple lies. And I have papers here, just lies. And there's been certain things that, you know, Trump has also said that have gone, you know, that I wouldn't say 100% lies, but I would say there was, you know, kind of not right, you know, certain things that
factually incorrect.
Yeah, factually incorrect, because he doesn't know everything. You know what I mean? We're talking about a man who wasn't a politician. We're talking about a man who was a businessman. So when situations happen, you have a team of people who are coming to him with the information and giving him the information that he needs and allowing him to be able to make a decision based on the information. So there's times where you may hear certain things that he says where it's, you know, the smallest part of that's not actually correct, but at the same time, they'll take that and they'll make a huge story out of it. And then it's like
the bleach and the UV light in your lungs, you know, which actually is a thing. I looked into it. There's actually technology that
absolutely
puts a device down the trachea into the lung.
And he even asked her that question. Like it was watching him ask that question to Dr. Birx, I think that's who he was talking to at the time. Yeah. Watching him ask her that, you should have been able to see that this is a man who actually doesn't know, who's actually questioning that. And then people took that and ran with it. And then you had the company Clorox, who like the next day they tried to make it seem like he was talking about them directly, like, no, don't drink Clorox bleach. It's like, he didn't endorse you guys and say that exactly like that. You know what I mean? But it was a question that was asked, and then they took that and just.
I said, like, using disinfectants to disinfect, and there are ways to do that. There are actually drugs that do that.
Absolutely.
But everybody, of course, mistook it, and they love to jump on the bandwagon. But,
absolutely.
You know, that's the thing you pointed out. That's the thing about Trump. I think that's different, is he's not a politician. You know, he's a businessman who is now the president. And the difference between him and most politicians that you can really, this is easy to sum this up, is the difference between their words and their actions. Okay. So Trump's words may be abrasive. They may be incorrect sometimes, but his actions and the policies that he's put forth and what he's done for this country has far exceeded what previous presidents have done, even though their words have been beautiful and they made beautiful promises, you know, like Obama, great orator. I love the way Obama talks.
Who I voted for twice. You know what I mean?
Yeah, me too.
I voted for that man 2 times because as a person, you know what I mean? He was personable. He was somebody that people love. So I can understand why people are so upset about Trump's personality not being held as high, or, you know, him not being at that level of what Obama was. But ultimately, when it comes to it, we're still talking about, you know, policies over personalities. We have to get out of this thing where we're worried about somebody's personality or what they feel or what they're thinking. What are they doing? You know, what is it that they're doing for people? What are they doing for America? You know, as a Black person, for me, I look at it as, what are they doing for African Americans? And that to me was just one of the things that was like, once I actually seen what was going on, it was real easy for me to just exit the Democratic Party. You know what I mean? Especially after reading Malcolm X and a lot of these other people and civil rights activists and leaders and stuff like that, and just their view on the Democratic Party.
Very picky.
And then after so much time has happened, you know what I mean? They were going through the same things with the Democratic Party back in the 60s and 70s that we still are going through with them now. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, are we going to learn? Are we going
Right.
to learn at some point and fix the issue? So for me, once I realized what was going on with the media, especially with the media more than anything, it just became apparent that this was a true witch hunt to try to take down a man who they never thought was going to become the president of the United States. I mean, I remember when everybody on CNN and Fox News and all these other stations, they laughed. They laughed at this man and said, this man will never be the president. Barack Obama went as far as to being on, I think it was Jimmy Kimmel, where he was reading one of the tweets that was actually from Donald Trump that said, President Obama will go down as one of the worst presidents in history. And Obama responded by saying, at least I will go down as a president. So when you have that type of situation where everybody was already against you from the jump, then you win and you you prove everybody wrong. How is everybody not mad at you? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And we see that in the media. I've seen so many stories. It's very hard for people to watch full stories, and I can understand that most people don't have time in order to sit there throughout the day or watch an entire clip or hear an entire segment.
Or they jump on those clickbait headlines. They don't even click on. They don't even take the bait. They just look at the headline.
They don't even have to. All the information that they need to know is right there in the headline, and they're selling this fear and they're selling this information to people because that's their agenda. We're moving into like a really, really far left, like a real far left agenda right now, and we almost have to be careful. Like really, really careful because it's getting scary. And the fact that people don't see what's going on is even more scarier because how much longer do we have to go through these things? You know what I mean? I don't get it, man.
They've effectively weaponized information.
Absolutely.
And they've used it now. This propaganda arm of the left is now using information as a weapon to not only strike fear into people with this COVID thing, but also disinform people against our president, so as to try to sway the election. And that, in my opinion, I mean that borders on like insurrection type activity.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't go as far as to say treason, but it's definitely not. It's not fair to the electoral system, and it's not fair to the American people who deserve.
It's against humanity, but literally.
Again, there we go. Right.
Everything we're talking about right now, I can back it up as crimes against humanity, just because there's no other excuse for it. You know what I mean? I don't get it, bud. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either, man. I mean, what was that? We were talking about Trump and the Pence. He did kind of, as I recall, back him up a little bit on him being called a racist or not denouncing racism or white supremacy. But there's one video that I think we were talking about this yesterday, and I'll pull it up here, that shows Trump on 20 different occasions.
20 different times.
Denouncing it, man.
I think it was like since 19 as far back as like 1992, 2000 in some cases of him denouncing, white supremacy. Saying he didn't want white supremacists to vote for him. The first time they asked him, the first time he ran, do you want these white supremacists voting for you? He said no. We don't want them. So I don't understand how that changed to now. Even Chris Wallace, we spoke on this yesterday, but Chris Wallace even asked him that same exact question before. So it's like
2016.
It's like,
debates.
Didn't you ask me that just like a couple years ago?
Yeah.
To me, it's just one of those things where it's like there's so many people that are out to get this president because he put his finger in an agenda that was supposed to happen, and he's messing things up for them right now. And it's
sure.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Both people on the left and the right don't like him for that reason, man, because he's messing up the game. But let's share that video real quick with our viewers and our listeners, just so they can see what we're talking about, so we can inform them, so they can in turn inform
because they wouldn't
others
believe it unless they see it.
Yeah. So it got pulled down, but
not a single.
No, wrong clip. Wrong clip. We'll bring that guy up later here, but I got the clip right here. I thought I had it set up. Trump condemns white supremacy 20 times. There it is. All right, here we go.
Cool.
He has yet once to condemn white supremacy, the neo-Nazis. He hasn't condemned a darn thing. You've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist.
A bigot, a racist.
Would you repudiate David Duke?
Sure.
David Duke and robocalls are out again, the white supremacist movement supporting you. Do you have any words for that?
Well, I disavow David Duke endorsement. I disavow, okay? When we looked at it and looked at the question, I disavowed David Duke. So I've disavowed David Duke all weekend long on Facebook, on Twitter, and obviously it's never enough.
So are you prepared right now to make a clear and unequivocal statement renouncing the support of all white supremacists?
Of course I am. Of course I am. When Chris joined, we had a news conference, and they asked me the exact same question. I said, I disavow. I disavowed then. I disavowed today on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. I disavowed again. David Duke is a bad person who I disavowed on numerous occasions over the years. I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. Ultimately, he got to the Ku Klux Klan, which obviously I'm going to disavow. I reject David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan.
David Duke is saying to his supporters and followers, vote for Donald Trump. White supremacists are saying, vote. You want those votes?
No, I don't want them, and I don't want him to say it.
And you want the supporters?
No, I don't want anything.
What do you think of white supremacists, by the way?
I don't like any group of hate.
David Duke announced Senate candidacy, claiming your agenda.
Are you ready before you ask the question?
Newt Gingrich said every Republican should repudiate this guy no matter what it takes.
And I do. Rebuked. Is that okay? Rebuked.
Rebuked.
Done.
Done.
Do you want white supremacists to vote for you?
No, I don't at all. Not at all.
His campaign is denouncing a show of support from the KKK's official newspaper, as in the Ku Klux Klan.
In the same New York Times interview, he denounced white supremacists. He denounced the neo-Nazis who support him.
Racism is evil. And those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. I spoke out forcefully against hatred, bigotry, and violence, and strongly condemned the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, and the KKK.
President Donald Trump signed a congressional joint resolution that condemns white supremacy, neo-Nazis, and
a resolution.
In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. Any group of hate, I don't like it. Any group of hate, I am, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's any other kind of supremacy, whether it's Antifa, whether it's any group of hate, I am very concerned about it, and I'll do something about it.
All right. Well, there you have it.
I think it's important that people know. Like, I've told somebody this before. I was like, did you not hear him disavow white supremacy? And they're like, what does disavow mean? Well, disavow actually means to deny any responsibility or support for. So he's denied responsibility, and he showed that he does not support them on numerous occasions. And I, as a black person, still find myself arguing with other African Americans who say, oh, this man's a racist. Well, even if he is a racist, let's just say he's a closet racist. You know what I mean? It goes back to what I said about policies. It's policies over personalities. But we can go back as far as to his black girlfriend that he used to date, Carrie Young. You know what I mean? It's those things where it's like, yo, what are we arguing over? You know what I mean? I don't see what we're arguing over, because I'm confused as to when he didn't deny racism. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, I guess they're pointing to, in this latest debate, you know, he said, he was asked, do you denounce it? And he said, sure. So, and last time I checked, sure is an affirmation. It's a yes. Like, do you want to coke with that? Sure.
Yeah.
You know, sure. That's yes. So it's like, I don't get it, man. I don't get it. But I think it's like, again, this is a weaponized term that's used to vilify him and his supporters. And so, like, for example, at this park I go to over in Beverly Hills every Saturday, there's like a Trump like in support of Trump rally, and pardon me, I just had the dog walk in, but and last weekend they had all the guys from Antifa and BLM show up, and they had this big banner, you know, death to all Trump Nazis. And it's like, dude, so once you label your enemy as this hateful thing, it's easy to to dehumanize them.
Absolutely.
And it means that they're easier to hate, they're easier to fight, they're easier to kill.
Absolutely.
And this is a slippery slope that we find ourselves going down, and it's a dangerous one. And I in turn, try not to dehumanize these people. I mean, Antifa, I get it. They think they're fighting fascists. They think they're fighting Nazis. And who doesn't hate Nazis, bro? Who doesn't hate fascists? I'm with that. I'm down with that.
I'm down with it. I feel you.
But what these guys are doing is they're just labeling everybody that's right of Mao, that doesn't agree with them, as a Nazi, as a fascist. And so it's like I said, it's dangerous, man. And we need to be careful.
I keep telling people that, we're in the middle of a civil war with our own people and with our own country right now. And we have to really pay attention to what's going on, especially with the things that are being said in the media, the way the media portrays headlines. Sometimes you just have to take a step back and look at it with a different, from a different viewpoint. You know what I mean? And then once you can do that, then maybe you can understand it. Like I said, I was one of those people, even if we discuss a year ago, you know what I mean? A year ago, I would have said, yeah, Donald Trump is a racist. A year ago, I would have put I would have had the same thought process. I did, but it literally took me to wake up to see what was really going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. Like, what was kind of the wake up moment that you had, or what was that one thing that you saw that made you question, or did you start to question the narrative and say, this doesn't quite seem right, let me investigate more? What was it?
So, okay, a friend of mine, I had posted something online way back when, and I'm always been for self-empowerment. I'm one of those people who I can't let things stop me, or can't let anything hold me down. And I wish more people were like that, because a lot of people could succeed if they had that mindset as well. But a friend of mine, we were discussing politics at the time, and a friend, I'm gonna give him a shout out. His name is Jordan Frosch. I went to school with him years ago, but he sent me something, and he was like, bro, he goes, I just want you to take a look at this. And what he sent me was a list of accomplishments that were actually accomplished within the first 3 years. We're talking about pre-COVID-19. We're talking about pre-pandemic, pre-country being shut down. And when I was looking at everything, I think I still actually have it in my messages. When I started noticing everything that he did, but there was 10 different pages of just accomplishment after accomplishment after accomplishment. It's like, yo, he's accomplished so much. Mm-hmm. But they're not talking about that. And once I seen that they were talking about the small things that just don't matter over the accomplishments, I think that's when I really realized that, we have to look at this with a different set of eyes. You know what I mean? We have to turn off our mainstream media at times in order to actually get the full story. There's a lot of people who don't get the full story sometimes, and they're quick to react. I'm one of those people. I'm not gonna lie.
Guilty of myself.
Absolutely. So when you hear something sometimes and you're quick to react without any of the facts, you have to realize that you could be wrong when the facts come out. You know what I mean? And there's many things that have been just happening, and the way of which things are happening now, it opened my eyes to what's really, really going on. We are doing a thing here in where I live. I was telling everybody, I'm kind of about 45 minutes outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And there's a lot of hostility in the city that I'm in, just between people, between who people are voting for. You almost can't say who you're voting for without being attacked. So I wanted to put this thing together of just kind of like a town hall meeting for the residents to actually come so that we can discuss these things, because a lot of the arguments I find myself having with people are things that I've already found to be false. And it takes me back to what Mike Pence said to Kamala Harris. You're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Right.
When it comes down to that, ultimately, I cannot stand for anybody who, I don't care if you want to vote for Joe Biden. I'm not one of those people who's going to tell you don't vote for Joe Biden, but I'm going to tell you, pay attention to what's been going on. He hasn't done anything in 47 years that he's been in politics. So what makes him running as a president any different? You know what I mean? Let's pay attention to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has done worse for the people in her own community, African Americans, during her time as a prosecutor and she's destroyed so many families. It's like, yo, she's not for you guys, you know. And I'm constantly on this like self motivation. I want to uplift people, especially my people, because we're in a town where there isn't that many of us, but the ones that are here, we're doing things. You know what I mean? We have a lot of successful African Americans in our town, and I'm trying to uplift them by giving them facts and giving them, you know, positive information. Right. But it seems any information that deals with Donald Trump is like, oh, you're a racist. I've been called a racist now. 15 times within this past week. And I just like,
I think people don't know don't understand the meaning of the term. I think
I don't think so, man.
It's been co-opted and weaponized, and now it's just used as, you know, I have this meme that I put up. It's like, you know, I don't always get called a racist, but when I do, I know I've just won an argument with a leftist.
Yeah.
So it's got the most interesting man in the world. You know, it's kind of funny, but yeah, it's true. I mean, people seem to throw that term around quite casually these days, and it's really a shame that it's lost its true meaning, because, you know, there are racists out there, and they're, I don't know, they're bitter, they're dangerous people. But I would like to kind of circle back to something you said, is that, you know, people look at this information, or they'll get some information, look at the headline, it'll make them angry, and then they find that they don't have all the facts. And I like to inform my listeners and my viewers from time to time that if you ever find yourself in a situation where something makes you angry, it makes you upset, gives you anxiety, it usually means you need more information.
Absolutely.
Okay. And that I'm currently working on a book on this called The Peace Formula. And I found that both internally with yourself, if you're experiencing this, or if you're having a conversation with someone, it means either, you know, if you're having an argument, in many cases, it means that they need more information or you need more information.
Absolutely.
And you can also scale this up to the macro size, you know, like about, you know, why things go on in the world, why people do things that they do, why, you know, countries act this way. And when you get more information about your opponent, it's never your enemy, but your opponent in many of these cases, you'll find that you begin to understand why they do the things they do,
the way they do,
and why they think the way they do. And
Absolutely.
then you can move towards a solution, and then ultimately towards peace. So I like our, you know, like I said, I like our viewers and our listeners to keep that in mind. And I like to remind them from time to time. So I'm glad we had the opportunity to do that right here. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely, man.
So, and that's kind of what this podcast is all about, dude. Really, I mean, is informing people and bringing people information that they might not normally get from like mainstream media. You know, this
Absolutely.
is alternative news, I guess you could say. You know, what I shared earlier.
It's not fake news, though. You know, it's so
yeah.
It's truthful, you know what I mean? It's
exactly, man, and it's a shame, dude, that we can't, because I grew up like where you could pretty much trust the news. You know, I came from, I was born in the 70s, and you know, you still could watch like 2020 or World News Tonight. You know,
absolutely.
With these guys, and they didn't come at you with slant. They didn't come at you with an agenda. They came to present you with information and facts, and allow you
now.
Huh?
They're selling fear now.
Right. That's what it's turned into. I mean, I really noticed that right after, or as 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I myself fell victim to it. Once 9/11 happened, I was glued to the TV, and I didn't stop watching cable news and network news for probably 8 to 10 years. It wasn't until like around 2010 that I finally started easing off of it. And I started realizing, I'm like, dude, this is bad. I got to stop watching the news, because I found that I was constantly anxious. I was constantly angry.
Mm-hmm.
I was constantly, you know, in fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, oh my God, it's the news.
Yeah. It's like the drug business, bro. It's very, very, very similar to selling drugs. Almost, they're using it to sell fear, and it creates the numbers for them that they need. You know, it promotes the agenda that they need. You know, it works.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, what they're doing with the news media is actually a military tactic. I don't know if you know that, but in other countries, the same way that they go around and, they perpetrate this false narrative, that's actually a military tactic that they actually use as well. So when you see it like I said, but it goes back again to what I'm talking about when I say crimes against humanity. That is ultimately what we're in right now.
Yeah, Obama actually legalized that during his second term.
Absolutely.
He legalized the use of propaganda against the American people.
Absolutely.
And the CIA is well embedded into the media and have been for quite a long time.
Hollywood, all of them.
And Hollywood, exactly, man. I mean, they've got these front companies, these shell companies that they control the narrative. They control what is being reported, what's being talked about, what's being shown in film and television. And it's scary, man, that we are being manipulated and people are being brainwashed. And they even did a study in the 60s or the 50s, I think it was.
50s, yeah.
The KGB found that, if you present someone with the same information over a period of 2 months, constantly bombarding with the same information, that there is no way that you can unconvince them that information is true.
It's true, right? Absolutely.
Yeah. And so for the very few of us that questioned the narrative to begin with when this whole COVID-19 thing started, or when, the thing with George Floyd went down, or, the thing with Jacob Blake, or any of these
Breonna
things.
Taylor, we could keep going on. There's
right. You say, wait a minute, let's get some more facts. Let's get some more information, man.
People don't want to wait for the facts and the information. And that ultimately is why we have bad news. You know what I mean? If we had all of the facts and all the information, I don't feel like people would be in such an uproar as they are. But ultimately, does America need to change? Do things need to change? Yes, things do need, things do need to change. But ultimately, it all starts with us. You know what I mean? And it starts with our own mind and our own understanding, because if we can see beyond the things that they're trying to do to us, we can get past that. You know what I mean? And people are doing it now. Like we talked yesterday about the have you heard of Blexit?
Yeah.
So it's like the black exit of the Democratic Party. 90% of African Americans are going to vote Democrat, just based on the fact that they're African Americans and they think that the Democratic Party is for them. And history has shown us multiple times that the Democratic Party is not for African Americans. And for whatever reason, there's so many of us who still blindly follow them just because they think it's a safe choice. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, nah, education is key. Education is real key in order to unlocking your mind and seeing what's going on. To be honest with you, there's a lot of false information in the world, and I just don't get how people don't see what's going on.
Right. You talk about education. I mean, in some of these neighborhoods where there's large black communities that are, again, kind of Democrat controlled and Democrat controlled cities and states, they are fighting against these politicians, against voucher system for charter schools, and private schools where these kids could get a better education, but they're in a sense forced into the public education system, which by all stretches of the imagination is substandard. So again, by doing this, they're in a sense keeping them suppressed, keeping them down.
Absolutely.
And that's really what I think the people in Blexit understand this.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, a lot of black voters don't, unfortunately. And however, there was a recent poll out of Rasmussen. I think actually you might be surprised by this, that back in 2016 when 2016 when Trump was first elected, I think he got something like 12% of the black vote.
Okay.
That's up to, not completely confirmed, but according to this one report by Rasmussen, which is pretty
good one,
accurate.
Yeah.
They say 36% is what the black vote is for Donald Trump for this go around.
Oh, well, I'm glad to actually hear that.
Yeah, so I think
I'm in that 36%.
Yeah, right. Again, yeah, you a former Democrat, voted
Absolutely.
Democrat, you know, so yeah, that would make some sense. But let me ask you this, man. I mean, do you think, let's talk a little bit about kind of BLM here. Would you agree that there is systemic racism in the United States? Do you think that's an issue? I mean, because the Democrats seem to bring this up a lot as a talking point, as do members or leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you see it? Have you experienced it? Is it a thing?
So there's racism in the United States, period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes people have to remember that. But yeah, there is racism, periods. I've, you know what I mean? Even in the area that I grew up in, I'm glad I can honestly say I haven't had like direct racism happen to me, but I've been in situations where when you look back and you're like, yeah, that was racist. Like, yeah, that was absolutely like a racially motivated. So yes, I do believe that there are issues that need addressed in America, to be honest with you, but Black Lives Matter. So let's just take Black Lives Matter, for instance. In my opinion, to say Black Lives Matter, that makes 100% sense to me. It just makes sense. And it's so easy to say Black Lives Matter. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. White lives matter. Hispanic lives matter. You know what I mean? We can keep going on. Greek lives matter. You know, ultimately for me, I feel that good lives matter because I don't think that the people who are out here doing wrong in the world, this is me, you know what I mean? And I'm entitled to my own opinion. You know what I mean? I don't really think those people who are out here doing bad and raping children and all this pedophilia and stuff like, I don't really think those lives matter. So we find ourselves in situations in America, actually, when it comes to like Black Lives Matter. I think Black Lives, the group had a huge opportunity of doing something bigger, but I feel like it's been infiltrated and it's been redirected in a route that's just not good. To me, I can't understand how this Black Lives Matter group has raised, from my understanding, like they've raised close to like $312 million. And out of the $312 million that they've raised, not a single dollar has actually gone to a Black life. They haven't paid for funerals. They haven't paid for anything, you know what I mean? In support of them. And Black Lives Matter backs Act Blue. You know about that?
Yeah, and a lot of that money was going through them to the Biden campaign.
Absolutely. So when you look at things like that, it's almost like I feel like they were on the right track.
Yeah.
As a movement, but I feel like the wrong people got involved. And in any group, whether it be police, whether it be teachers, whether it be a civil rights group, if bad people get involved, you have bad apples. You know what I mean? And things can go wrong, but as far as a group themselves, Black Lives Matter, I was 100% for them. I'm 100%. When people come here to my studio, they're like, "What is your password for your studio?" And I just look at them like Black Lives Matter, you know, because to me it's so simple just to say it. Yeah. You know what I mean? And sometimes I want to gauge those people's reaction. Sometimes when they look up at me like, "Oh, okay," but I really honestly believe that they had an opportunity to do well. It's hard for me to back an organization called Black Lives Matter when they're not there for things that Black Lives Matter should be there for. You know what I mean? I understand that it was started to address, racial inequalities and policing and stuff like that, but there's a bigger purpose still. You know what I mean? You can address racial biases in policing and making sure police officers are held accountable. Donald Trump, he signed an executive order for police reform, you know what I mean? So that there's a database of bad apples, bad apple cops, you know what I mean? That's what I call them, bad apple cops.
Yeah.
So when you think of that, there's bad apples in anything. And I just feel like Black Lives Matter had a bigger opportunity to be a bigger group and do so much more, but I feel like the narrative changed, and now we're in like this civil disruption amongst our people, amongst everybody in the United States, because look at the police officers. The group Black Lives Matter came up, and then next thing you know, the police officers took it as, well, Blue Lives Matter. You know what I mean? There's no such thing as a blue life. You know what I mean? You have the opportunity of being a blue life. That's your decision to become like you.
You weren't born like that.
Absolutely.
Right?
Like I didn't tell my mom, I didn't, you know, make sure I'm black when I come out. You know, like you can't decide on those things.
Yeah.
But they had an opportunity of doing great. I still feel like there is room for them to do amazing things, but the narrative has to change. And I feel like we have to work with each other better on better social, how do I want to put it? Better, a better way of getting to the problems.
Yeah.
Well, we have to address, you know, we have to address things like social injustices in the, you know, in policing, just in general. So things like that, yes, they do need addressed. But when the group is now rioting and looting and you know, protests that were good turn into bad protests and all this other stuff, it's like, yeah, we're losing the message. We're losing the good of what Black Lives Matter actually stood for in the beginning. And I feel like if we're not working towards a solution, then we're just going to keep destroying the economy. We're going to destroy people's brains and how people think. You know what I mean? We've gone so far left, but it's not even right.
Right. No, and you know, it just in my observation, it seems to be very divisive between black and white. Whereas before any of this happened, there was an issue with police brutality, and there's been an issue with police brutality for a long time.
Yeah.
And again, if you look into why police act the way they do, you'd find out that there's a lot more to it than just wanting to beat people up or just wanting to shoot.
There's a lot of things that go on in their mental.
But what it's turned into is this attack on a whole race of people because of the color of their skin. So we're now making it okay for someone to feel racist against another person again. It's like we're going backwards here, man. And saying that, you know, well, it's this white supremacy, it's the whole you know, the nation was built on this white ideology, and we have to reprogram that, you know, make people have this white guilt and stuff. And it's like, are we moving forward with that, or are we just tearing other people down instead of bringing people up?
Absolutely.
You know, and I think that is the missed opportunity that they had, man. And it seems like there's a lot of anger behind it, and that fuels them. I mean, there, you know, a lot of anger, a lot of hatred, and I get it, man.
Absolutely.
You know, I would be angry and I would be fearful if this was happening to my people as well.
Absolutely.
You know, but yeah, I think it's not very constructive the way that they're conducting it. And in fact, I think they've turned a lot of people kind of against the movement. I think support for BLM has dropped considerably since its outset when this first started with George Floyd.
But what we're talking about also isn't a black or white issue. We're talking about an issue that is an American issue. You know what I mean? That's something that's actually going on here in America. So sometimes we have to address it as an American issue rather than address it as a black and white issue. Because when you have the narrative that it's a black and white problem, where it creates this thing in your mind, well, there must be a black and white problem. Even though most people aren't directly experiencing the problem, those headlines are telling you that there's a problem between whites and blacks. So now, generally speaking, for people who I don't really want to say aren't smart, but people who aren't fully awake to see what's going on, you know, it creates those issues, and then it's a generation problem, and it's going to continue to happen unless we fix it now. Like it's a mindset that we have to fix now. Yeah. Because if we don't fix it now, we're going to go backwards, and we're going to keep on going backwards, because the end result of this cannot be good. It just can't be good. You know what I mean? We have to fix the narrative. We have to tell people, we have to stop with this black issue, white issue, black man murdered by white cop. That should never be the narrative. You know what I mean? Yeah. American murdered by American police officer. You don't read those. Those aren't the headlines that you read. Right. You read black man murdered, white cop. You know what I mean? And those narratives are the narratives that push this racist. They're all racist.
Right.
If you're voting for Trump, clearly you're a racist. The only people that vote for Trump are racist and old people. It's like, wait, I'm not racist and I'm not old, but
yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like that's what we're presented with, but we're not looking at the what is really at issue here? What is the core issue of why these interactions are occurring? All right, it's contrary to what LeBron James might say or might think, is that black people are not hunting. Cops aren't out there hunting down black people. That's just, the statistics don't show that. What I think is at issue, based on the statistics, is that black people are having more interactions with police because they're often involved in crimes. Now, I'm not saying all black people commit crimes. I'm just saying, you just look at the numbers. And so let's go to the core of that. You know, what is causing so much crime within the black community, so much murder, black on black murder? What is at the core of this? And so we got to dig deeper down to the fundamental levels of what is causing it to solve the problem, because you're not going to solve it by defunding the police or putting less police on the street. You know, you want to better train them. Yeah. You want to get in people, social workers who can work with people with mental health issues and all these other things instead of sending out the cops. Yeah, I get that. And that's a great idea. But defunding the police and taking more police off the streets is not a good idea. As you can see, they've already tried it in areas like New York and Minneapolis.
Doesn't work.
It's been a disaster.
Absolutely.
And the community, even the black communities, are calling for the police to come back because they realize that brings in this semblance of order out of chaos and safety. But you know, we can look at some people have pointed out that these Democrat policies in these cities of offering more money to a single mother as opposed to a family of, you know, four with a mother and a father in terms of financial assistance has
in effect
has and it's promoted more women being single and getting rid of the man in the home. And then when children are raised without a father, they tend to statistically, get more involved in drugs, more involved in gang activity, more involved in crime, which
education
in prison.
Education is a huge part of miseducation, or as I would say, is a big part of that as well. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that lead up to these problems that we have.
Yeah. And so I think addressing what's the cause as opposed to trying to apply a cure to the symptom is the more appropriate approach. And hopefully, you know, cooler heads will prevail and people will come to their senses over this.
Hopefully because we're right now we're at a point where people think it's okay to I'm gonna just use Jacob Blake for an example. People think it's okay that you can fight a police officer, attempt to run from a police officer after you fought them, and then not be shot. Like to me, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we know what police officers are capable. We know what they can do. You know what I mean? And especially even when I seen the whole Jacob Blake situation, just in general, it didn't make sense to me because we seen half of the altercation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that goes back to what I was saying about not having all of the facts. You know what I mean? We're talking about a man who fought the police officers, had to be tased 2 times. You know what I mean? And then tried to run around into his car to potentially do who knows what.
Get a weapon or whatever. The cops don't know.
You could have jumped in the car and just ran me over. We just fought you. You know what I mean? So who knows what's now on your mind after 2 officers just attempted to tase you. And the only thing they're trying to do is arrest you for a warrant that you had from a July incident. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like people think that we need police reform because they shouldn't be able to just shoot this man in his back for trying to I don't think that we need police reform for those type of situations. You know what I mean? Like that situation to me was like, real talk, I'd have done it. You know what I mean? If I just got into a fight with you and I know that you're going out to your car to attempt to grab something, I'm gonna get you before you can get to your car. You know what I mean? That's just me. So it's one of those things where it's like, yo, we have to be really, really careful We have to be really, really careful about the things that we're fighting for and the things that we want to see change in, because the narrative right now doesn't fit what we want. You know what I mean? It doesn't help us get to a better solution for what needs to happen. We're only making problems worse. You know what I mean? And now people think it's okay to just hate the police officers. Like I said, I have a few officers. Where I'm at here downtown, we have like the police station, like 2 buildings next to us or whatnot. But I have a few friends that are officers. You know, I'm not a bad person. Most of them know me. I'm the photographer of the town. You know, so when you can have good policing, and when you can have people out there who know your officers, like we have to get back to, we have to become civil again. We're not civil right now. And I think that's a huge problem that we have in America is there's this divide of people. And most people would say, well, that divide came when Donald Trump came in the White House. Well, that divide has always been there. You know what I mean? There's been issues forever. You know what I mean? And now with everything that's coming on, you know, I just feel like the Democrat, I see more issues being put into play by the Democratic Party than I do the Republican Party. And to me, it's one of those things where it's like, I see it. I don't understand how some people don't see what's going on, because we have to be really careful what we're arguing and fighting for, because if we don't have a solution, it almost doesn't make sense.
Right.
You know, it doesn't make sense for us to be this way with each other right now. You know what I mean?
It's divisive. I mean,
it's divisive. It is, absolutely.
I feel like some days it seems like they're trying to push a race war. Like they're trying to push this division.
I absolutely feel that. I absolutely feel that.
It's scary, man. I mean, I don't want to get in a war. I don't want to fight anybody.
I love my white friends. I love my Hispanics.
Right.
I love all my friends. You know what I mean? So
same here.
I don't want there to be a problem, but we have to come together as a nation and really say, yo, this is not what's going to happen. You know what I mean? We're not going to allow this to happen.
You know what? I think some more education needs to go on too around policing and why policing is done. I think there was a BLM activist who went to a police academy, and they put him through the paces, put him through the training, and put him in situations where there was a suspect. You know, there's one where the suspect is coming at him and he doesn't stop, and he's like, "What do you do in the situation?" You know, and do you pull a gun? Do you not? Or does the suspect take you out? And another one where you're telling the suspect to stop, but he's going behind his car and he won't stop, and all of a sudden the guy reaches behind the car, pulls out a gun, boom, 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 you're dead. So it's like cops get put in these situations, and people really don't understand what goes behind it and what is in the training. My cousin is a law enforcement, a cousin by marriage, not by blood, but I don't know if that makes a difference. But
it's family.
Yeah, and he's out in Denver, and he told me this story about how he went to this. It was a predominantly lower class neighborhood, and there was a call for a guy who was playing music too loud in his apartment. This is really rundown apartment building. They had been there before. So they knock on the door. He opens up. He's like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And he's like, "Well, we need to ask you to turn down the music." Go fuck yourself. And he tries to shut the door, and they stop it, and they open the door, man. And they grabs him, and before he could do anything, they're like, either shut down the music or you're going to jail. And the guy was like, "Okay, all right, okay, no problem." He turns down the music. Problem solved. Next night. So they used force, all right, to control the situation, right? So here's what happened, man. Next night, same call comes in, but my cousin, they're across town on a different call, and these 2 other cops go up there, and these are some like newbies, fresh out of the academy, a little bit timid.
Mm-hmm.
They go up to the door, "Sir, we need to turn down the music." He's like, "Fuck you guys, man, get the fuck out of here," right? And so they're like, "Sir," and he goes and he walks back into his apartment, reaches around the corner, picks up a gun, boom, 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 fires at the officers, barely missing one. Guy said the bullet whizzed by his head. They return fire, and they killed him. Now, the difference between those 2 situations is, in the first situation, the officers were assertive. They dominated and took control of the situation.
Of their training as well.
To prevent someone from getting harmed, whether that's the officer or the suspect.
Absolutely.
And in the second scenario, they didn't do that, and the suspect ended up getting killed. So people got to understand, because I used to hate cops, man.
Yeah.
How they would approach me, how they would, even when you get pulled over or whatever, or you're doing something
you too much. They want just too much information from you. Like, hey,
yeah, and they're very aggressive. They're like, kind of got the hand on the gun, like, what are you doing? Shine a light in your face, all this shit, right? So, and I never understood it. I was like, why are these cops such assholes, man?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they're trained to control that situation, dominate that situation, so that things don't spin out of control and someone gets killed.
Right, absolutely.
And I think a lot of people need to understand that better and learn, like, don't fight the cops, man. I think Chris Rock did a thing on this years ago when he was on SNL, did a video. He's like, if you don't fight the cops, you won't get your ass kicked.
Yeah, literally.
Pretty simple, man. If you're going down the street bumping NWA, singing "fuck the police" while you're getting pulled over by the police, pretty good chance you're going to get your ass kicked.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
People need to use some common sense, man, and just dial it back, bro, and don't escalate the situation.
And that's what's happening now more than ever, is like people just over the hatred that's been built up of police for people. Now the situations where police officers come to help people, fuck you, what you doing here, this, that. And it's like, yo,
right.
He's an officer, like he's here for, it's just one of those, there's so much hatred now that we're at a civil war with ourselves, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so sad. It's so we seem to be the laughing stock of like all the countries. It's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, what's going on with these people in America? There's not the same issues over in France. They don't have the same issues with their officers having to, kill people or nothing like that. They don't have to use excessive force and stuff the way it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, we have this mentality of hatred towards the police officers. And I mean, we've all watched Cops. We've seen what they're capable of doing. You know what I mean? And I've always known that if a cop pulls me over, I'm just going to be as nice as I possibly can just to get out of the situation. I don't even care what is going on. Yes, officer, hi, officer. What can absolutely. And most of them know me. You know what I mean? So when I'm pulled over, most of the times they're like, "Oh, it's you. Fix that. Get that light fixed back there or something." But when you're aggressive, there's a reason for them to believe that you're aggressive for a reason. You know what I mean? And then things kind of go left, and then it gets real, real bad. But my mother has just always taught me just to have respect for, just older people. Have respect for the older people, the police officers, the people that work for us to help take care of us. We're losing our sense of respect for people. And it's so sad, man. It's devastating almost, because a lot of the issues that we see going on, they could be stopped. Yeah. If people just remain calm, you know what I mean? If everything just remained calm, there could be a lot of situations that don't get escalated. You know what I mean? Like it's sad. And all it takes is respect. And it just takes some form of decency in the moment just to get it over. Let's just get this over with. You know what I mean? I don't know. But it's really sad.
It is, man. You make a good point there. It's respect or disrespect or lack of respect that I think is at the core of all this. I mean, it not just respect between criminal suspects or
authority
and authority, but respect for each other.
Absolutely.
In a lot of these cases, man. Like when we just meet out on the street, I've been confronted a couple of times by these BLM or Antifa guys when I'm down at these pro-Trump rallies, and there's not a lot of respect on either side. It seems like there's just a lot of yelling, man. And I thought about it afterward. I'm like, dude, I wish I would have taken the time to listen to that person instead of just yelling at him and telling him, this is my position. Why do you hate me? Why do you think I'm a racist? Fuck you or whatever.
Right.
And it's like comes back down to communication, man, and having respect for people.
Absolutely.
So,
That's what, that respect can fix so many issues that we have in this world, but people have just they've grown so accustomed to, you know, the social media world, to where you can just say anything and not get punched in the face for it. You know what I mean? Like Mike Tyson said that, like, people are just getting comfortable typing behind a keyboard and not getting punched in the face for some of the things that they say, you know, and we're at that level in society where people just don't have respect for each other anymore. And if you don't have respect for somebody, then like you just, what's the point? You know what I mean? It's crazy, man.
That's true, dude. There are a lot of, they call them, you know, keyboard warriors out there. who you wouldn't say that to a person's face. Killers. Yeah, there you go. Keyboard killers, man. And a lot of cases you wouldn't say that to somebody's face.
Absolutely.
Man.
Absolutely.
You know,
part of me believes that most people were taught morals. Most people were taught respect. That's what the good in me wants to believe. But where we're at now today, it's like, I don't know. I don't know how you were raised, because I was raised like that. And then to see people who weren't raised like that and to react the way that they react, it's like, yeah, I'm just not going to deal with you, because
for sure, man. Well, we are getting down to the wire here. There's a couple of things that we didn't get to cover. Perhaps
whatever you want to talk about, man.
You know, if you want to go on. I mean, there's we were going to talk a little bit about the Proud Boys, and I think the misconception about the Proud Boys,
about how they're so racist.
Right, exactly. That the
number one racist group in America now is the Proud Boys, I guess.
There's all this mislabeling of groups going on by the media. You know, you've got just the recent thing with Governor Whitmer up there getting kidnapped by supposedly these white supremacist groups, and they're pro-Trump. And then you go and you do a little research. I accidentally pulled up one of the videos earlier. You know, that turns out the guy's an anarchist, and he's actually hates Trump.
He hates Trump, absolutely.
One of the other guys, posted on his Facebook that he went to BLM rallies. You know, so there's a real big misconception in these labels that are being placed on these groups, man. I think like I said, the white boys, the Proud Boys. You know, they've got members from all different walks of life, and I believe, you know, the what is it, the leader of the one chapter, the national leader, I think he's a Cuban, he's an African Cuban, black Cuban.
So I show this picture to people all the time. This is him right here, and it's not like a close-up shot of him, but yeah, he is a black man.
Okay,
Cuban, who is also Cuban. So when I hear they're a group that is completely racist, to me, that does not make sense. You know, I can't take that narrative when I know that there are people of color in it. Now, let's just say that there are racists that are Proud Boys. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean all Proud Boys are racist. Absolutely. And I use the same thing when people try to say, well, you know, the people who try to say if you're voting for Trump, then you're a racist. Well, if you watch Ellen DeGeneres, does that make you a homosexual? It's that same type of thinking, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it doesn't work that way, bro. And I'm constantly telling people, like, it doesn't work that way. Yes, there might be some of them that are racist.
Mm-hmm.
As Americans, I cannot tell you how to think, how to feel, how you should think, how you should feel. All I know is that however you think or however you feel, as long as you're not acting with violence or hurting innocent people, you have the right to think however you want to think. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that I'm not going to stop somebody from being, you know, a white supremacist. I'm not going to stop somebody from feeling how they want to feel. But as long as they're not hurting anybody, that's what we need to be talking about. As long as they're not actively hurting people, or they're not actively doing anything that hurts the people in different communities, what are we arguing over?
Mm-hmm.
We're now saying that people can't be people. They can't think. We're telling people that they can't think a specific way. And it's just like, yo, that's damaging. Yeah, that's real damaging. Not everybody inside of the Proud Boys is a racist. I'm sorry. And the facts are now there that they're not a racist group of people.
They're a multi-ethnic, multicultural
absolutely. And
group.
and they're a newer group. I think they were just formed in like 2015, 2016 or something like that.
Yeah.
But their whole purpose was to stand for the country, was to stand for the president, and with the, to back the United States. There's some of them that are ex-military. There's some of them that, all walks of life, but to classify them as a racist group or a white supremacist group, it's 100% wrong to do it like that. You can't do that. You know what I mean?
And they actually labeled themselves as Western chauvinists.
Chauvinists,
and if you look up the definition of chauvinism, it is a exaggerated or aggressive patriotism.
Towards the country.
Right, for the country. So, exaggerated patriotism. Okay, and in some cases aggressive when they're defending it. And I've listened to Gavin McInnes and several people from the organization speak on this.
Now, Gavin was the
original founder.
Original founder, correct.
Yeah, and then he kind of stepped back after a while because there was a lot of heat involved.
Yeah, his attorneys told him that it would be better that you just not say nothing.
Right. But what he pointed out and what has been evident really in many of these cases is that they are on the defense. A lot of times they do their thing and then they're approached by Antifa or these other groups that attack them, and then they defend themselves. And so, that's where this, aggressive patriotism, I think, could be described as such. So, somebody needs to stand up for America, because there's been a lot of America bashing going on in these recent days. America sucks. America's this. America's that. America's racist. America, is evil. Death to America. I heard some of these people chanting in the streets, or no, what is it? No borders, no walls, no USA at all.
No USA.
And so somebody needs to stand up to that and say, no, sir, that's not how we roll. Not in this country.
And that's what they do. And I've even heard situations. I've even heard like testimonials from African Americans who said that there's been times where Proud Boys have actually come to do security at events that they had.
Yes.
So it's like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. So you're telling me that they're for civil liberties? Because if they're for your civil liberties, I'm all for that.
Right.
You know what I mean? I don't care what the bad apples of the group think. But primarily, they're for your civil liberties. So, and if I'm not mistaken, I printed up something before. The whole hatred between these two groups, the Proud Boys and let's just say Antifa, from my understanding, started with the death of a Proud Boys member who was murdered at the hands of one of the Antifa, like an Antifa group member. So from my understanding, that hatred for them with each other started because of the death that started with Antifa killing a Proud Boy member. So it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, yo, what are we arguing for? What are we mad at? Because I don't understand what we're upset about. We are getting mad because people are being people. we are getting mad because we can't. It doesn't seem like we can allow other people to think for themselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm over that notion that the Proud Boys. There's a lot of things that like I'm just over. You know what I mean? And we can discuss them, and I can tell you why I don't feel that way. But to people who don't do their own research, who just hear that the Proud Boys are racist, to them, the Proud Boys are racist. You know what I mean? And you're not going to change their mind on that at all unless you can show them the actual facts. And the facts are that 15 to 19% of the men inside of the Proud Boys are people of color. That alone should be enough to stop that conversation in its tracks and say, okay, we can't keep using that one. We can't keep doing that.
They got members that are Jewish. They got members that are gay.
Yeah.
And it was so funny. The gay community was trying to attack them with the hashtag Proud Boys. And Gavin McInnes, he was in an interview, he pointed out, he goes, we've got more gay members per capita than there are in the United States per capita.
What does that tell you?
We've got bigger representation of gays in our group than nationally.
Absolutely.
So it's like that's just water off the duck's back, really.
Absolutely.
But I think it's a great illustration of a great opportunity to illustrate the diversity of that group in the organization.
Absolutely.
And hopefully bring attention to the fact that they're not racist, and they stand for something more. And it's not about white supremacy. It's about American excellence, and about loving the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seems more and more often that guys on the left, the people on the left, kind of hate the country, and they it seems like they want to destroy it. And I hate to put those words on them and the words in their mouths, but you see a lot of times they come out, like I just said, America is a terrible place, and that, they're all about these communist and socialist ideologies, and they want to tear the country down. They want to in some cases, like overthrow the government. They want to start this race war so that they can, start this insurrection and take over the government. I don't know, man. It's messy, and it's getting dangerous.
And the thing is, if those people actually left outside of the United States and went anywhere else other than the United States, they'd be coming back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because what we are offered here, the opportunities that we have here are way greater. You know what I mean? Than we are the United States. We are one of the most powerful countries. You know what I mean? So at that same time, it's like, yo, you can leave this country if you hate it so bad, but I guarantee you, after like your first year or 2 years, you'll be coming back.
Oh yeah, no. They say America is the only country that so great that even people that hate it won't leave.
Absolutely.
And people come from all over the world to come here, and hey, I don't blame them, man. I spent 6 months in Central America, and I know what it's like down there. And I'll tell you what, I never appreciated our country more than when I came back.
Absolutely.
And it's, the simple things like a smooth road to drive on, or the availability of any type of food that you want pretty much 24 hours a day. Just little things like that.
Yeah, education. There's many reasons why America thrives the way it does. You know what I mean? And I just think people need to be reminded that, like, we are a good country. We have problems. We've had issues in the past, and we're not a perfect country. There is no perfect country, but what we're afforded and the opportunities that we have as people, farly great. It just exceeds the opportunities that any other country that you can have. You know what I mean? We've already proved that a black man from Chicago can become the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
That alone should be enough for anybody to see that they have an opportunity here in the United States, as long as they put their mind to what they want.
Yep. I agree, man. We've come a very long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that's a good place to end on kind of a positive note, and something very pro-America, because that's what the show is kind of about here. Free America.
Absolutely.
Coming on, we're talking about different things, talking about all kinds of stuff, and I've really enjoyed our conversation today, man. So I hope that you will come back someday.
Of course, anytime.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, dude. So
anytime.
Well, again, thanks. And we will. Do you have anything you want to end with? Can people learn more about you? Do you want to find out more about you on social media or about your photography?
If you want to find me anywhere online, my website for my photography is www.studio724lp for Lawrence Photography, studio724lp.com. I'm online everywhere at iJoshuaLawrence, kind of like iPod. So it's iJoshuaLawrence. Dropping my keys. You can find me on Facebook under Joshua S. Lawrence. We can have these conversations. If you ever have a question or anything, you guys want to ask me my opinion on a specific situation, I'm 100% down to give it to you.
Awesome. Good. Yeah, no, man. And you do. And it's fun. That's how I met you, man. I loved interacting with you online.
Absolutely.
I love looking at the stuff you post. So yeah, I do encourage people to go and check out Joshua Lawrence's Facebook posting, as well as some of those other websites. So again, dude, thank you so much.
Absolutely, bud.
Enjoyed talking to you. We'll talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, bro. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. Well, that was fun. That's about it. I know we ran a little bit long today, but I think it was a good conversation, and I really enjoyed speaking with Joshua, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. I hope we left you entertained and a little more informed than when we started today. So once again, I would like to thank Joshua Lawrence for who definitely brought some interesting and enlightening perspectives to the show. I'd also like to thank you, our viewers and listeners, for tuning in. And once again, if you are enjoying what we're doing over here, head on over to patreon.com and show us a little love. Throw us a freaking bone, Scotty. You can also find this episode and others wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Apple Podcasts and others. And while you're there, please leave a kind word and a high rating if you like our show. Also, make sure to stop by freeamericapodcast.com and subscribe to our site, where you'll find this episode and others, along with special reports from out in the field, as well as news articles covering issues not discussed in the mainstream media. So, for now and the foreseeable future, I'm Nick Yaya. And remember, this November, you don't necessarily have to vote Republican. But for the love of God, please don't vote Democrat. Good night, everybody.